The great chamber on Nexus Prime hummed with quiet conversations as delegates from 12 different worlds gathered around the massive circular table. The room stretched high above them with walls made of crystal that showed the stars beyond. Ambassador Zephytar of the Kellian Empire stood at his position, his blue-scaled hands touching the surface of the table as holographic images appeared in the center of the room. The images showed a small blue and green planet spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Several alien delegates leaned forward to get a better look, while others remained in their seats with expressions of mild curiosity. The planet looked ordinary compared to the grand worlds that most of the council members called home. "This is the third planet in what the inhabitants call the Sol System," Zephytar said in his deep voice. "Our long-range scouts discovered intelligent life there just 60 rotations ago. The species calls themselves humans and their world Earth." Commander Silthek of the reptilian Vorthak delegation made a dismissive sound from the back of his throat. His red eyes studied the images with obvious boredom. "Another primitive species, I suppose? What makes them worth our time?" The hologram changed to show scenes from Earth's surface. Cities with tall buildings stretched across the landscape while vehicles moved along roads between them. The aliens watched humans walking through streets and working in various locations. Most of the council members had seen similar scenes from dozens of other developing worlds. "They show signs of basic space capability," Zephytar continued. "They have launched small vessels beyond their atmosphere and established stations in orbit around their planet. However, their technology appears quite limited compared to our standards." Resonance Prime, Kylneth of the Crystalline Etherians, spoke in musical tones that translated through the chamber's communication system. "Their energy signatures are remarkably weak. Do they even possess plasma manipulation or quantum field generators?" "Negative," Zephytar replied. "They appear to rely primarily on combustion-based propulsion and chemical energy sources. Their military forces use projectile weapons that fire solid objects rather than energy beams." Several delegates began laughing at this information. The idea of shooting metal objects at enemies seemed absurdly outdated to beings who had been using directed energy weapons for thousands of years. Even the youngest civilizations in the galaxy had progressed beyond such primitive methods within decades of achieving spaceflight. The hologram shifted again to show human military exercises. Soldiers in camouflage uniforms ran across training grounds while carrying large packs and bulky weapons. Vehicles moved slowly across rough terrain, leaving clouds of dust behind them. Aircraft flew overhead, making loud noises and trailing smoke from their engines. "Look at how slowly they move," Commander Silthek said with amusement. "Our warriors can cross similar distances in half the time using anti-gravity packs, and those weapons they carry appear incredibly heavy and cumbersome. Their armor provides no energy shielding whatsoever," added another delegate from the insectoid Zephyrian hive. "A single plasma bolt would penetrate their defenses without difficulty." Elder Vorthak of the dominant hegemony shifted in his massive chair. His forearms moved gracefully as he gestured toward the images. "Perhaps we should not waste council time on such a primitive species. They will need centuries to develop technology worthy of our attention." Zephytar touched his control panel and the images changed to show human spacecraft. The vessels looked crude and blocky compared to the sleek energy-based ships used by galactic civilizations. Exhaust flames pushed them through space while their hulls showed obvious signs of atmospheric entry damage. "Their space vessels are particularly concerning," Zephytar said. "They require chemical propulsion to achieve orbit and show no signs of faster-than-light capability. The largest of their military ships carries fewer than 2,000 personnel and appears to be constructed primarily of metal alloys." "Metal construction," Kylneth sang in disbelief. "Have they not discovered energy matrix materials or quantum steel?" "Apparently not. Their ships also lack deflector shields and rely on thick armor plating for protection. We detected no particle beam weapons or plasma cannons on any of their vessels. The chamber filled with more laughter and dismissive comments. To these advanced beings, the idea of flying around in metal boxes while shooting projectiles at enemies seemed like something from their own ancient history. Most civilizations had abandoned such methods before they even left their home planets. Dr. Jake Morrison sat quietly in the small transport vessel UES Determination as it approached the massive space station orbiting Nexus Prime. Through the porthole beside him, he could see the incredible structure growing larger with each passing minute. The station stretched for dozens of kilometers in all directions with docking bays that could hold ships the size of cities. Sergeant Alex Carter and his 5 Marines checked their equipment one final time in the cramped passenger compartment. Their standard-issue rifles and body armor looked simple compared to the advanced technology they expected to encounter. Morrison knew the aliens would judge humanity based on first impressions, and their small delegation would not appear impressive. Approaching Docking Bay 7, announced Captain Rodriguez from the cockpit. The station's traffic control is guiding us to a berth near the diplomatic quarters. Morrison straightened his uniform and reviewed the files containing everything humanity knew about galactic civilization. The information was limited since this would be their first official contact with the council that governed this region of space. Earth's leaders had chosen him for this mission because of his experience in international diplomacy, but he wondered if those skills would translate to alien politics. The Determination shuddered slightly as it made contact with the docking clamps. Through the communication system, they could hear alien voices speaking in languages the translation computers struggled to process. Morrison knew that stepping off this ship would change humanity's future forever, but he had no idea how the advanced civilizations of the galaxy would receive Earth's request to join their community. The great doors of the council chamber opened with a soft whisper as Dr. Jake Morrison entered, followed by Sergeant Alex Carter and 2 Marines. The aliens at the circular table turned to observe the human delegation with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. Morrison felt the weight of their stares as he approached the designated speaking area in the center of the room. Elder Vorthak leaned forward in his massive chair and spoke in a voice that rumbled through the chamber's translation system. "So, these are the humans we have been discussing. You appear exactly as primitive as our initial observations suggested." Morrison kept his expression neutral despite the obvious insult. He had expected this kind of reception after reviewing what little intelligence Earth had gathered about galactic politics. "Honored elder and distinguished delegates, I am Dr. Jake Morrison representing the United Earth Government. We come seeking peaceful contact and the possibility of joining your galactic community." Several delegates exchanged glances that clearly indicated their skepticism about humanity's worthiness. Commander Silthek stood up from his position and walked closer to examine the humans more carefully. His reptilian features showed obvious disdain as he studied their simple uniforms and basic equipment. "Joining our community requires certain standards," Silthek said while circling around Morrison. "Every species must prove they possess the military capability to defend themselves and contribute to galactic security. We cannot waste resources protecting worlds that lack adequate defenses. Earth has substantial defensive capabilities," Morrison replied carefully. "Our military forces are well trained and equipped to handle various threats." The chamber filled with barely suppressed laughter from multiple delegates. Zeftar activated his holographic display again, showing footage of human military exercises. The images showed soldiers moving slowly across training grounds while carrying what appeared to be incredibly primitive weapons and equipment. "These are your elite warriors?" asked Resonance Prime Kylneth in musical tones that somehow conveyed mockery. "They move like children playing war games. Their weapons appear to be little more than metal tubes that shoot tiny projectiles." Vorthak raised one of his 4 hands to quiet the laughter. "Perhaps we should offer them the traditional opportunity to prove themselves. Every species seeking council membership must complete the trial of strength on Keth Moore. Those who succeed demonstrate their worthiness to join our ranks." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine at the mention of this trial. Earth's intelligence had found no detailed information about what it involved, but the few references they had discovered suggested it was extremely dangerous. Could you explain the nature of this trial? Kethmore is a contested moon in the Outer Rim territories, Vorthak explained. It contains automated defense systems and combat scenarios designed to test military capabilities. Participants must successfully complete all phases within a specified time limit to pass. How many species have successfully completed this trial? Morrison asked, though he suspected he would not like the answer. The last 6 species to attempt it withdrew before completion, Silthek said with obvious satisfaction. The proud Zentaran Empire lasted exactly 47 minutes before requesting immediate evacuation. Their advanced energy weapons and plasma shields proved insufficient against the moon's defenses. Morrison realized this was likely humanity's only chance to gain acceptance from the galactic community. Refusing the challenge would probably result in Earth being dismissed as too primitive for consideration. Accepting it might lead to military disaster, but at least offered some possibility of success. I will need to consult with Earth's leadership before accepting such a challenge, Morrison said. This decision cannot be made without proper authorization. Vorthak gestured toward a communication console near the edge of the chamber. You may use our quantum relay system to contact your homeworld immediately. We will monitor the transmission to ensure you do not attempt any deception. Morrison walked to the console with Sergeant Carter close behind him. The device was clearly far more advanced than anything Earth possessed, but the interface seemed straightforward enough. After a few moments, he managed to establish a connection with Earth Defense Command headquarters. General Lisa Parker's face appeared on the screen, looking concerned about the unexpected communication. Jake, what's the situation up there? We weren't expecting contact for another 6 hours. The situation has become complicated, General, Morrison said, while aware that dozens of alien eyes were watching his every move. The Galactic Council is offering us a trial to prove humanity's military worthiness. It involves combat scenarios on a moon called Kethmore. Parker's expression grew serious as she processed this information. What kind of combat scenarios? Do we know what we would be facing? Automated defense systems and unspecified challenges designed to test military capabilities. The last several species to attempt it failed within hours. I need authorization to either accept or decline this trial. The general was quiet for several long seconds while she considered the implications. Morrison could hear voices in the background as other Earth leaders were brought into the discussion. The aliens continued watching with expressions of mild interest, as if they were observing an entertaining but ultimately pointless exercise. Jake, we need to accept this challenge, Parker finally said. If we refuse, they'll never take us seriously, and Earth will remain isolated. Give me 30 standard days to prepare an appropriate response. 30 days may not be enough time to mount an effective operation against advanced alien technology, Morrison warned. Let me worry about that. Admiral Chen Wei has been working on contingency plans for exactly this kind of situation. Tell them we accept their trial. Morrison ended the communication and turned back toward the assembled delegates. Most of them were engaged in quiet conversations that suggested they found the entire situation amusing. Vorthak gestured for silence as Morrison approached the center of the chamber again. Earth accepts the trial of strength, Morrison announced. We request 30 standard rotations to prepare our forces. Granted, Vorthak said with what might have been a smile on his alien features. The trial will commence at the end of that period. You should use the time wisely to prepare for what your species will face. Zeftar leaned back in his chair with obvious satisfaction. I predict they will withdraw before the trial even begins, once they understand what they are facing. Humans lack the technology and tactical knowledge to survive even the first phase. Commander Silthek nodded in agreement. Their primitive projectile weapons will be useless against energy-based defenses. Even if they somehow manage to land forces on the moon, they will be overwhelmed within minutes. Morrison maintained his diplomatic composure despite growing anger at the aliens' dismissive attitude. "We appreciate the Council's confidence in our abilities. Earth's military forces look forward to demonstrating human capabilities." The delegates began filing out of the chamber while continuing their conversations about humanity's inevitable failure. Morrison watched them leave while wondering if he had just committed his species to a military disaster that would end any hope of joining the galactic community. The surveillance drones orbiting Earth transmitted their observations back to the Galactic Council with mechanical precision. On Nexus Prime, the alien delegates gathered around holographic displays showing human military activity across multiple continents. What they saw confused them more with each passing day. Zeftar adjusted the display controls to focus on a launch facility in what humans called Florida. Instead of the sleek, energy-based vessels the aliens expected, humans were loading crude, chemical rockets with unusual cargo containers. The rockets themselves appeared to be nothing more than controlled explosions designed to push objects into space. "Look at those primitive fuel systems," Commander Silthek said while studying the images. "They are literally burning chemicals to achieve orbit. How do they expect such inefficient propulsion to reach Kethmur in any reasonable time frame?" Colonel Ryan Brooks supervised the loading operations at Kennedy Space Center, while teams of technicians carefully positioned unmarked containers inside the payload bays. The containers were sealed with symbols and warning labels that the alien surveillance systems could not identify or translate. Each rocket carried only a fraction of what galactic transport vessels could manage. "Their cargo appears to consist entirely of metal boxes," observed Kylaneth in musical tones of bewilderment. "Do they not possess energy matrix storage systems or quantum compression technology? Those containers must weigh enormous amounts." Dr. Lisa Chang worked frantically in her laboratory at the Xenobiology Research Institute analyzing the technology samples the aliens had provided for the trial. The advanced materials and energy systems were far beyond anything Earth had developed, but she discovered something interesting about their design principles. Every piece of alien technology operated within specific frequency ranges and energy signatures. The alien defense systems are calibrated to detect and counter energy-based attacks, she explained to Admiral Chen Wei during a secure video conference. Their shields deflect plasma beams and particle weapons by matching specific resonance patterns. But look at this data. Chang displayed her analysis on the screen showing how the alien shields reacted to different types of energy. They're designed to stop directed energy weapons and deflect high-velocity particles. But kinetic impacts from solid objects at lower velocities don't trigger the same defensive responses. Admiral Chen studied the information with growing interest. "Are you saying their shields won't stop bullets?" "Not exactly, but close. Their technology is optimized to handle threats they understand. Chemical explosives produce energy signatures they might not recognize as weapons. Physical impacts from projectiles could potentially bypass their defensive systems entirely." Captain Ben Rodriguez led his special operations team through training exercises at Fort Bragg, while alien surveillance drones recorded their activities. To the watching aliens, the humans appeared to be preparing for an entirely different type of warfare than what the trial demanded. Instead of practicing with energy weapons, the soldiers drilled with projectile rifles and explosive charges. "Their tactical formations are completely chaotic," Silthek commented while watching the training footage. "They spread out across wide areas instead of maintaining proper energy shield overlaps. How do they expect to coordinate defensive fields with such random positioning?" The human soldiers practiced moving through terrain using cover and concealment, techniques that made no sense to aliens accustomed to energy-based combat. They hid behind natural obstacles and used camouflage patterns to avoid detection rather than relying on personal shield generators or cloaking fields. Rodriguez's team spent hours learning to use equipment that appeared crude compared to galactic military standards. Their weapons required manual reloading and produced visible muzzle flashes when fired. Their armor provided no energy deflection capabilities and relied entirely on physical materials to stop incoming projectiles. "Look how slowly they reload those primitive weapons," laughed a delegate from the hegemony. "Our plasma rifles can fire continuously for hours without interruption. These humans will be helpless once their limited ammunition supplies are exhausted." 3T. Aliens grew increasingly bored watching human military preparations that seemed completely inadequate for the challenges of Kethmore. Most delegates stopped monitoring the surveillance feeds after the first week, assuming humanity would either withdraw from the trial or fail spectacularly when they encountered real galactic military technology. Only Zeftar continued studying the human activities with growing puzzlement. Something about their preparations bothered him, but he could not identify exactly what seemed wrong. The humans were obviously preparing for combat, but using methods that had been obsolete in the galaxy for thousands of years. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan trained with her assault team at a facility designed to simulate alien environments. They practiced deploying from crude atmospheric entry pods that relied on heat shields and parachutes rather than sophisticated teleportation systems. The pods looked like metal cans compared to the elegant transport methods used by advanced civilizations. "Their insertion method appears suicidal," Kyleneth observed. "Those primitive capsules will be detected and destroyed long before reaching the surface. Why do they not use quantum tunneling or energy displacement for troop movement?" Sergeant Danny Walsh's demolition team worked with chemicals and compounds that the alien sensors could not properly identify. They mixed substances that produced violent reactions when combined but showed no energy signatures that registered as weapons to the surveillance systems. The aliens assumed these were construction materials or industrial supplies. "What are they planning to build on Kethmore?" wondered one of the younger delegates. "Those chemical compounds appear suitable for excavation or construction work. Perhaps they intend to establish a temporary base during the trial." The human demolition experts practiced with timing devices and remote detonators that operated on radio frequencies rather than quantum entanglement or psychic resonance. Their equipment looked incredibly primitive compared to the instant activation systems used throughout the galaxy. Major Chris Thompson coordinated defensive exercises that emphasized mobility and tactical flexibility rather than maintaining static energy barriers. His soldiers practiced rapid movement between positions and used hit-and-run tactics instead of standing firm behind shields. "Their defensive strategy makes no logical sense," Silthek complained. "How can they maintain overlapping fields of fire without proper energy coordination? They scatter like frightened animals instead of forming coherent battle lines." The human training emphasized adaptation and improvisation rather than following rigid tactical doctrines. Soldiers learned to modify their equipment and change their approaches based on changing battlefield conditions. This flexibility confused aliens who relied on precise energy coordination between their forces. Commander Sarah Blake led aerial combat training using aircraft that burned fossil fuels and relied on aerodynamic lift rather than anti-gravity systems. The planes were loud and produced visible exhaust trails that would make them easy targets for any competent defense system. "Those flying machines are completely inadequate," declared an insectoid delegate. "They move slowly and cannot maneuver. In 3 dimensions like proper combat vessels, any civilized defense system will eliminate them immediately." As the 30-day preparation period neared its end, the Alien Council felt confident that humanity would either withdraw from the trial or provide entertaining footage of their inevitable defeat. None of them suspected that the humans were preparing to demonstrate tactics that the galaxy had forgotten ever existed. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace near Kethmore with none of the grace or elegance the Galactic Council had expected. 12 vessels of various sizes dropped out of faster-than-light travel using crude warp drives that left visible distortions in space behind them. The ships looked like flying scrap yards compared to the sleek energy-based craft that usually approached the trial moon. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, studying the tactical displays while his crew made final preparations. The ship around him hummed with the sound of mechanical systems and chemical reactions rather than the silent efficiency of pure energy technology. Through the viewports, he could see Kethmore rotating slowly in the distance, surrounded by the automated defense platforms that had defeated the last 6 species to attempt this trial. "All ships report ready for Phase 1, announced the communications officer from his station. "Ground forces are standing by in their drop pods and demolition teams have armed their charges." Chen nodded while reviewing the intelligence data. Earth had gathered about the moon's defenses. Dr. Chang's analysis suggested the automated systems would expect energy-based attacks using standard galactic tactical doctrines. The human approach would be completely different and hopefully catch the defenses by surprise. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council gathered in their observation chamber to watch what they expected would be a brief and amusing demonstration of human incompetence. The viewing screens showed the human fleet approaching Kethmore while automated defense systems began their activation sequences. "Look at those ugly vessels," Commander Silthek said with obvious disdain. "They appear to be held together with metal bolts and chemical welds. How did they even survive the journey through hyperspace?" Elder Vorthak settled into his massive chair while other delegates found comfortable positions to observe the coming entertainment. "I predict they will withdraw as soon as the defense systems target their ships. No primitive species has ever withstood the first energy barrage. The automated defenses around Kethmore came online with mechanical precision that had been refined over centuries of trials. Energy projectors emerged from hidden positions while shield generators created overlapping barriers around strategic locations. Sensor arrays began scanning the approaching human ships, looking for the energy signatures and shield frequencies that identified standard military vessels. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan checked her equipment one final time inside her drop pod, while her assault team made similar preparations around her. The pod was nothing more than a reinforced metal shell with basic life support systems and crude maneuvering thrusters. Compared to the sophisticated teleportation systems used by galactic military forces, it seemed like something from the Stone Age. 30 seconds to launch," announced the ship's intercom system. "All drop teams prepare for atmospheric entry." The first wave of energy attacks from the moon's defenses struck the human fleet with devastating force that should have destroyed or disabled several vessels immediately. Instead, the aliens watched in confusion as the human ships deployed clouds of metallic chaff that scattered the energy beams in random directions. The crude countermeasures worked because they operated on principles the defense systems had never encountered. "What are those particles they are releasing?" asked Kylaneth in musical tones of bewilderment. "The energy projectors cannot maintain target locks through that interference field." Zeftar leaned forward in his chair, studying the tactical displays with growing concern. "Their ships are not generating standard shield frequencies. The targeting systems appear to be having difficulty identifying them as military vessels." The human ships began evasive maneuvers that looked random and chaotic. To observers accustomed to the precise formations used by energy-based fleets, instead of maintaining optimal positions for shield overlap and energy coordination, the vessels spread out across a wide area using unpredictable flight patterns. Chen watched the tactical display as his fleet approached the moon's gravity well, while defensive systems struggled to track targets that did not behave according to established patterns. "Launch all drop pods. Begin Phase 1 insertion." Dozens of metal capsules shot out from the human ships toward Kethmore's surface like a swarm of meteors. The primitive entry systems relied on heat shields and atmospheric braking rather than sophisticated energy displacement technology. They crashed through the defensive grid simply because the automated systems were not programmed to recognize such crude insertion methods as military threats. "Those metal containers are falling like debris," Silthek observed with amusement. "Do they expect to survive atmospheric entry in such primitive vessels?" Lieutenant Sullivan felt her drop pod shaking violently as it plunged through the moon's atmosphere while automated defense turrets fired energy beams at what they assumed was falling space junk. The targeting computers classified the pods as non-threatening objects because they showed no energy signatures or active guidance systems. Her pod hit the surface with tremendous impact that would have killed anyone not protected by advanced shock absorption systems. Around her, dozens of similar pods crashed into the lunar landscape while their occupants prepared to begin the ground phase of the trial. Sergeant Danny Walsh kicked open his pod's hatch and emerged into the alien landscape carrying equipment. That looked like construction tools rather than military weapons. His demolition team spread out across the area while defense turrets continued targeting the human ships overhead instead of focusing on the ground forces. First objective is the primary shield generator, Walsh announced over the communication system. Remember, these charges are designed to overload their power systems, not create visible explosions. The demolition team approached their targets, carrying chemical explosives that produced no energy signatures detectable by the moon's sensors. The automated defenses had been programmed to identify and counter energy-based weapons, but showed no response to simple chemical compounds mixed together by human engineers. Walsh planted his charges on what appeared to be a minor power coupling, while his team positioned similar devices throughout the defensive installation. The alien technology was incredibly advanced, but relied entirely on energy-based detection systems that did not recognize chemical explosives as weapons. Charges planted and armed, Walsh reported. Detonation in 30 seconds. The council delegates watched their displays showing human soldiers moving through the defensive perimeter with what appeared to be construction equipment. The automated systems continued firing at the ships overhead while ignoring the ground forces that posed no apparent threat to their operations. "Why are the defenses not engaging the ground forces?" Vorthak demanded. "Those humans are moving freely through areas that should be protected by multiple overlapping fields." "The sensor systems show no military threats on the surface," replied Dr. Kethmore, who had designed the trial defenses. "Those humans are carrying construction tools and industrial supplies. The systems are correctly focusing on the military vessels in orbit." Walsh triggered the detonation sequence and watched as chemical explosives tore through alien technology that had no defense against simple kinetic force and thermal shock. The sophisticated energy systems failed catastrophically when subjected to crude but effective demolition techniques. The first defensive grid went dark as power systems overloaded and shield generators shut down automatically to prevent cascade failures. Alarms began sounding throughout the installation while backup systems tried to compensate for the unexpected damage. "Impossible!" Kethmore gasped as his displays showed critical systems failing across the entire defensive network. "Those were simple chemical reactions. The shields should have deflected any energy release from such primitive sources." Major Chris Thompson led the second wave of ground forces out of their landing pods while the first defensive perimeter collapsed around them. His soldiers moved through the alien installation using tactics that had not been seen in galactic warfare for millennia. Instead of advancing behind energy shields, the human forces took cover behind physical obstacles and used suppressing fire to keep automated turrets from tracking them effectively. Their projectile weapons punched through alien armor that was designed to deflect energy beams but provided no protection against solid metal bullets. The council chamber erupted in shocked confusion as their displays showed defensive systems that had stopped the galaxy's most advanced military forces being systematically destroyed by humans using weapons that seemed to belong in a museum. The second phase of the trial activated automatically as sensors detected the failure of the first defensive grid. Deep within Kethmore's core, massive manufacturing systems came online and began producing robotic warriors designed to overwhelm any military force that had penetrated the outer defenses. These machines had been crafted using the finest galactic military technology and programmed with tactical knowledge from 1,000 different species. Major Chris Thompson watched through his binoculars as the first wave of robotic defenders emerged from underground bunkers across the lunar surface. The machines moved with mechanical precision while their energy weapons charged and their shield generators created overlapping defensive fields. Each robot was equipped with the same advanced systems that had made galactic military forces nearly invincible for centuries. "All units, this is Bravo 6, Thompson announced over the communication network. "Robot forces are deploying from bunkers 3 through 7. Estimated strength is 200 units with full energy shielding and plasma weaponry. His soldiers took positions behind improvised barriers made from crashed drop pods and debris from the destroyed defensive installations. Their projectile weapons looked pathetically inadequate compared to the advanced energy systems approaching their positions, but Thompson had studied the intelligence reports and understood why human tactics might succeed where alien methods had failed. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council leaned forward in their observation chamber, expecting to finally see the humans overwhelmed by superior technology. The robotic defenders represented the pinnacle of galactic military engineering and had never failed to defeat attacking forces within minutes of deployment. "Now we shall see these primitive humans face real opposition," Commander Siltek said with satisfaction. "Those robots are equipped with personal shield generators and plasma cannons. Human projectile weapons will be completely useless against such advanced defenses." Elder Vorthak nodded in agreement while studying the tactical displays. "Each robot possesses the firepower of an entire galactic infantry squad. The humans will be forced to withdraw once they realize the hopelessness of their situation." The robotic forces advanced across the lunar terrain in perfect formation, while their energy weapons began targeting the human positions. Bright plasma bolts struck the areas where Thompson's soldiers had taken cover, but instead of the expected devastation, the humans seemed to absorb the attacks and continue fighting. Thompson's troops had positioned themselves behind barriers that appeared crude, but had been specifically designed to handle energy-based attacks. The debris and metal plates they used for cover absorbed plasma bolts and deflected particle beams while providing firing positions that allowed them to engage targets with their projectile weapons. "Target the shield generators," Thompson ordered, while sighting his rifle on the nearest robot. Dr. Chang's analysis indicates they're vulnerable to kinetic impacts that bypass their energy deflection systems. The human soldiers opened fire with weapons that seemed impossibly primitive compared to their opponents' advanced systems. Instead of energy beams, their rifles shot solid metal bullets that struck the robotic defenders with devastating effect. The robots' shields deflected the initial impacts but began failing as sustained kinetic bombardment overloaded their power systems. Sergeant Danny Walsh's demolition team flanked the robot formation while staying low and using natural terrain for concealment. The machine's sensors were calibrated to detect energy signatures and movement patterns associated with galactic military tactics. They did not recognize humans crawling through shadows as a significant threat. "Charges placed on the command node," Walsh reported over the communication system. "These robots are networked together through quantum entanglement systems, but the control hub uses standard power coupling that we can overload." The human demolition expert triggered his explosives and watched as the robotic command structure collapsed under kinetic force that its shields could not deflect. Chemical explosions tore through alien technology designed to handle energy attacks, but completely vulnerable to simple physical destruction. Commander Sarah Blake led her squadron of primitive aircraft over the battlefield, while robot forces tried to engage aerial targets using anti-gravity-based defensive systems. Her pilots flew converted atmospheric fighters that burned fossil fuels and relied on aerodynamic lift rather than sophisticated propulsion technology. "Weapons hot," Blake announced over the radio system. "These robots are using predictable targeting, algorithms designed for energy-based aircraft. Stay low and use terrain masking to avoid their sensor locks." The human aircraft dropped conventional explosives on robot formations while flying below the detection threshold of anti-gravity sensors. Their bombs were nothing more than chemical compounds mixed together by human engineers, but they created electromagnetic pulses that disabled entire squadrons of robotic defenders. "Impossible," gasped Dr. Kethmore as his tactical displays showed. Robot forces being systematically destroyed by attacks they were not programmed to counter. Those machines represent our most advanced military technology. How are primitive chemical weapons defeating energy-based defenses? Resonance Prime Kael'neth sang in tones of growing alarm as more displays showed human forces advancing through areas that should have been impassable. Their tactics do not conform to any known military doctrine. They use methods that were abandoned by civilized species millennia ago. Captain Nick Foster led his engineering team through the robot production facility while automated systems continued manufacturing defenders according to preset parameters. The alien technology was incredibly sophisticated, but relied entirely on quantum processors and energy matrix controls that humans could not operate or understand. "We cannot reprogram their systems," Foster reported while his team planted crude, but effective sabotage devices throughout the facility. "But we can short-circuit their power distribution using basic electrical principles." The human engineers hot-wired alien control systems using copper cables and chemical batteries that created electrical feedback in quantum circuits never designed to handle such primitive power sources. Production lines shut down as sophisticated. Manufacturing systems failed catastrophically when exposed to simple direct current electricity. Foster's team jury-rigged defensive turrets to fire on their own systems while bypassing safety protocols using mechanical switches and physical wire connections. The alien designers had never considered the possibility that someone would use such crude methods to override their sophisticated security systems. "Primary production facility is offline," Foster announced while his team moved to the next objective. "Robot reinforcement rate has dropped to 0, and several defensive positions are now firing on each other." The council delegates watched in stunned silence as their displays showed systems that had been perfected over thousands of years being defeated by methods their ancestors had abandoned before achieving spaceflight. Human forces advanced through defensive positions using tactics that seemed to come from ancient history. Thompson's soldiers captured robot command posts by overwhelming their occupants with sustained projectile fire that bypassed energy shields and disabled mechanical systems through simple kinetic damage. They used grenades that exploded with chemical force rather than energy release and threw them like primitive warriors from prehistoric times. Phase 2 defensive systems have been neutralized, Thompson reported while surveying the battlefield covered with disabled robot defenders. "Human casualties are minimal and we have established control over the primary installation." Admiral Chen Wei received the report aboard the UES Defiance while his fleet continued engaging the moon's orbital defenses using tactics that confused alien technology at every level. "Excellent work, Major. Prepare for Phase 3 deployment." Elder Vorthak stood up from his chair with an expression of shocked disbelief as the tactical displays showed the second phase of the trial ending in complete human victory. "This cannot be accurate. Those readings must indicate equipment malfunction or sensor errors." "The data is correct," Zeftar replied in a shaken voice. "The humans have defeated our most advanced military systems using methods that should not have worked against any civilized defense force." Commander Silthek stared at the displays showing human soldiers moving freely through installations that had stopped galactic fleets. "How is this possible? Their weapons are primitive, and their tactics appear completely random." The council chamber filled with urgent conversations as delegates tried to understand how a species they had dismissed as barely worthy of contact had just accomplished what no galactic civilization had managed in the past century. The final phase of the trial began with alarms echoing across Kethmoor's surface as the moon's ultimate defense system activated for the first time in over 3 centuries. Deep beneath the lunar crust, ancient machinery hummed to life and began, channeling enormous amounts of energy into a containment field that had held the galaxy's most feared weapon in dormancy for generations. Colonel Amy Rodriguez watched through her tactical display as energy readings spiked beyond anything her sensors had detected during the previous phases. The ground beneath her feet vibrated with power discharges that seemed to shake the entire moon, while her special weapons team made final preparations for what intelligence reports suggested would be their greatest challenge. "All units be advised," Rodriguez announced over the communication network. "Phase 3 is activating and energy signatures indicate we are about to face something significantly more dangerous than the previous defenses." On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council stood at their observation screens with expressions ranging from amazement to outright fear. None of them had expected the trial to reach its final phase, and several delegates were already discussing the implications of humanity's unexpected success. "The Guardian is awakening," Elder Vorthak said in a voice filled with dread. "No species has faced this creature and survived. Perhaps we should abort the trial before the humans are completely destroyed." Dr. Kethmore shook his head while monitoring the energy readings from deep within the moon. "The Guardian cannot be deactivated once released. The humans must face it or be consumed by it. There are no other options available." The creature that emerged from its ancient prison was unlike anything in known galactic records. It appeared to be composed entirely of living energy that shifted and flowed like liquid fire while growing larger with each passing moment. Its form had no fixed shape, but radiated power that distorted space around it and overloaded sensors trying to analyze its structure. "Energy-based life form," Rodriguez reported, while her team spread out across the lunar surface. "Estimated power output exceeds our measurement capabilities, and it appears to be absorbing energy from the surrounding environment to increase its strength. The Guardian had been created by a long-extinct civilization as the ultimate defensive weapon capable of defeating any conceivable threat. It fed on energy attacks and grew stronger when exposed to the advanced weapons used by galactic military forces. Every species that had reached the final phase of the trial had been consumed within minutes. Commander Sarah Blake's aircraft attempted to engage the creature using conventional missiles, but watched in horror as their explosives were absorbed into the Guardian's energy matrix and converted into additional power. The entity grew larger and more aggressive with each attack, as if the human weapons were feeding it rather than causing damage. "Conventional weapons appear ineffective," Blake reported, while pulling her squadron back to a safe distance. "The creature is absorbing our missile impacts and using them to increase its energy output." Colonel Rodriguez studied the tactical situation while remembering Dr. Chang's analysis of galactic technology and its limitations. Every piece of alien equipment they had encountered operated on energy manipulation principles that this creature had been specifically designed to counter and consume. "Switch to experimental weapons," Rodriguez ordered while her team unpacked equipment that looked crude even by human standards. "Deploy the railguns and molecular disruptors. We are going to try something that thing has probably never encountered before." The special weapons team assembled devices that operated on completely different principles than anything the Guardian had been designed to face. Instead of energy-based attacks, the railguns used electromagnetic force to launch solid projectiles at incredible velocities, while molecular disruptors created cascading chemical reactions rather than energy discharges. Rodriguez aimed her railgun at the creature's center mass and fired a tungsten rod that struck with purely kinetic force. The Guardian recoiled from the impact as if confused by an attack that contained no energy for it to absorb and convert. The solid projectile punched through its energy matrix, causing visible disruption to its form. "Direct hit with kinetic penetrator," Rodriguez announced while her team prepared follow-up attacks. "The creature appears vulnerable to physical impacts that bypass its energy absorption capabilities." The Guardian lashed out with tendrils of living fire that should have incinerated anything they touched, but the human soldiers had positioned themselves behind barriers specifically designed to handle energy attacks. Their crude defenses absorbed the creature's strikes while allowing them to maintain offensive positions. Sergeant Danny Walsh approached the creature from an unexpected angle, carrying chemical explosives that produced no energy signatures detectable. by its sensory systems. The Guardian focused on the obvious threats posed by the railgun team while ignoring what appeared to be a human carrying construction materials. Charges placed at the base of its energy anchor points, Walsh reported, while moving quickly away from the creature. These are thermite-based devices that will create intense heat through chemical reaction rather than energy projection. The demolition expert triggered his charges and watched as chemical fire burned through the Guardian's connection to the moon's power grid. The creature began to weaken as its energy supply was severed by attacks it could not absorb or counter effectively. Captain Nick Foster's engineering team had spent the previous phases studying alien technology and learning how to interfere with its operation using crude but effective methods. They approached the Guardian's containment system while it was distracted by the kinetic attacks and began short-circuiting power couplings with simple electrical devices. "Containment field is destabilizing," Foster announced while his team worked frantically to overload the ancient control systems. "We are creating feedback loops in their quantum processors using basic electrical current." The human engineers jury rigged the containment system to work in reverse using copper wires and chemical batteries that created electrical interference in circuits designed for pure energy operation. The Guardian's prison became a trap as the modified systems began draining its power rather than containing it. Major Chris Thompson coordinated the final assault using combined arms tactics that had not been seen in galactic warfare for thousands of years. His soldiers attacked the weakened Guardian with projectile weapons, while aircraft dropped chemical explosives, and engineering teams continued sabotaging its power sources. "All units concentrate fire on the energy core," Thompson ordered while sighting his rifle on the creature's rapidly shrinking form. "Use kinetic penetrators and chemical warheads. Avoid energy-based weapons that might feed its recovery systems." The Guardian collapsed under sustained attacks from weapons it had never been designed to counter. Its energy matrix dissipated as kinetic projectiles disrupted its cohesion, while chemical explosives severed its connections to external power sources. Within minutes, the galaxy's ultimate defensive weapon was reduced to scattered energy patterns that faded into nothing. Chapter. Council chamber on Nexus Prime fell silent as their displays showed the impossible sight of the Guardian's defeat. Delegates stared in shock at readings that indicated humanity had accomplished what no galactic civilization had managed in over 3 centuries. "Phase 3 complete," Admiral Chen Wei announced from his flagship while human forces secured the lunar surface. "All objectives achieved with minimal casualties. We are prepared to begin Phase 4 operations if required." Elder Vorthak found his voice after several long moments of stunned silence. "There is no Phase 4. The trial has 3 phases and you have completed them all successfully." Dr. Jake Morrison stepped forward in the observation chamber with a slight smile on his face. "Admiral Chen tends to be thorough in his planning. Earth's military doctrine always includes contingency operations beyond the stated objectives." "Military doctrine?" Kylnath sang in tones of bewilderment. "You mean there are established principles behind these chaotic tactics we have witnessed?" General Lisa Parker's voice crackled through the communication system as the quantum relay connected her to the council chamber. "Dr. Morrison is correct that our demonstration today represents standard tactical approaches used by Earth's military forces. However, this operation utilized only training units and basic equipment." The council delegates exchanged alarmed glances as the implications of this statement became clear. Commander Silthek leaned forward with obvious concern. "Training units? You mean these were not your elite forces?" "The units that completed your trial represent approximately 0.01% of Earth's total military capability," Parker continued. "Our full doctrine includes coordinated nuclear weapon deployment, orbital bombardment platforms, and strategic concepts we call total warfare." Zeftar felt a chill run through his scaled body as he realized how badly the council had misjudged humanity's capabilities. "Total warfare? What does that term mean in your military context?" Complete mobilization of all available resources for the systematic destruction of enemy forces and infrastructure, Parker explained matter-of-factly.